Welcome back, Deep Divers, to another late-night exploration where we pull back the layers on complex topics to really uncover the core insights. Tonight, we're embarking on a particularly, well, poignant journey. We're delving into a deeply personal and incredibly raw account from a former hacktivist known as Dexer. His story, provocatively titled My Life in Anonymous, an Atonement. It offers just a rare insider's perspective. Our mission today is to truly listen, to learn and to understand the intricate dance between deep conviction and, well, often harsh consequences within the world of these decentralized movements. Dexer's narrative is far more than just recounting cyber ops or, online protests. It's a profound introspection on identity, on that powerful human need for belonging, and on the often conflicting realities of collective action. What we're really looking at here are the profound lessons his journey offers about commitment and how the very human elements, our desires, our egos, our capacities for both passion and, well, apathy become what we might call the bugs in the system protocol, even with most decentralized ideals.
It's an absolutely critical framing, because when most people think of anonymous, they conjure these images of this amorphous, totally decentralized thing, a collective with no identity, right? Allowing anyone to just take up arms for a cause. It's perceived as this powerful, almost like mythical, leaderless force for justice or chaos, depending on how you look at it. But the reality, as Dexer's story really underscores, is far more nuanced. As one Reddit user, Inside Dingo or 4913, quite astutely noted, there's been this growing sentiment of its decline over time. This user pointed out that original, highly talented groups eventually got cocky, bragging, and Bellador slipping up, that kind of thing, which inevitably led to many big fish.
Yeah.
The most skilled and prominent members getting busted by authorities.
Yeah, it's the high-profile ones.
Yeah, exactly. And this, in turn, allowed less and less talented hackers and more less than capable people to join the movement, often driven primarily for clout, ego, etc. You know the type. So Dexer's journey offers us this unique, deeply human insider's view on that evolution. It's almost a counter-narrative that reveals the complex interplay between the lofty ideals of Anonymous and the messy, unpredictable wetware that is, well, human nature itself.
Okay, so with that broader context of Anonymous's shifting landscape in mind, let's now dive directly into Dexer's personal journey. For a full decade, he describes himself as an orbiter, just kind of circling the movement, observing from a distance, driven by what he calls mixed emotions, which sounds like a fascinating blend, right? Ideological alignment with Anonymous's core principles, maybe a deep curiosity about its methods, and perhaps a cautious apprehension about fully committing. This period, from just watching to actually participating, it feels incredibly common for many drawn to these kinds of movements. You believe in the ideals, but there's that period of internal debate and external observation before you actually take the plunge.
Totally. You dip your toes in.
Yeah. And Dexer himself was remarkably humble about his early role. He acknowledged he never considered himself top tier or the best of them. In fact, he often found himself labeled a low-level hacker, or even, get this, a Mickey Mouse hacker by others. It gives you a sense of his grounded self-awareness, I think, even as he was drawn deeper into the fold, just watching the collective from the edges.
Yeah, that self-description, paired with his long orbiter phase, it really highlights the shifting landscape of Anonymous that was developing kind of in the background. Most people, when they think of Anonymous, they instinctively recall what's often called its golden age, or first gen, right? Roughly between, say, 2007 and 2011. This era brought us names that became almost synonymous with the movement in the public mind. People like Commander X, known for his political activism and, well, his legal battles against the state.
Right, he was very visible.
Very. And Tapaheri and Kayla, associated with major breaches against big companies like Sony and the security firm H.B. Gary. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. H.B. Gary was huge.
And Jeremy Hammond, of course, imprisoned for his role in the Stratfor leaks. These were the high-profile figures. But what's crucial, and what Dexer's experience helps illuminate, is that this wasn't the entire story, not by a long shot. There were significant exceptions, like Derek Lawstutter, also known as NightSec or KY Anonymous. His impactful work on the Steubenville sexual assault case. That really brought international recognition to issues of sexual violence and corruption. It showed the powerful reach of this decentralized collective beyond just pure hacktivism.
That's a really important point. It wasn't all just about taking down websites.
Exactly, and Dexer himself notes that, quote, away from public view, Anonymous continued to thrive. This means that while some of the more high-profile figures were facing consequences, getting busted, many others were diligently learning from the first generation's mistakes. They were refining their operational security, choosing to lay low maybe, or
Yeah.
perhaps they simply grew up, moved on, transitioned into other branches of the broader hacker or infosec community. This speaks volumes about the evolving, almost adaptive nature of decentralized movements, how different generations interpret, participate, and adapt its core principles, often operating in the shadows while the public narrative focused on just a few big names.
And this hidden evolution, it really sets the stage for Dexer's own active engagement. This is where his personal story gets particularly interesting. He recalls a pivotal moment around early 2020. At this point, he had formed his own group called the Federation. Their focus was squarely on security and digital privacy, and they were actively trying to legitimize themselves within the broader information security or infosec community.
Mm.
They were serious about their work. They even had a blog named after one of their specific tools, NetWire.
Netwire, right, a remote access Trojan.
Exactly. For those less familiar, NetWire was a pretty sophisticated RAT. These are types of malware that let an attacker remotely control a computer system, often for, reconnaissance or getting data out. The fact they named their blog after a tool like that clearly signaled the Federation's technical skills and their focus on the more advanced pen testing side of cybersecurity. And they were super active on Twitter, back when, as he puts it, the anonymous cause was in full swing. A very different, more vibrant platform for hacktivist discussion than what we often see today. This was their moment to step into the light, trying to carve out a legitimate, respected space for themselves in a community that, let's be honest, often blurred the lines between white hat and black hat hacking.
What's truly fascinating here, though, is the power of endorsement. Even within a movement that explicitly defines itself as leaderless and decentralized, the Federation gained significant, almost overnight recognition when Commander X, one of those original Golden Age figures we just mentioned, acknowledged their presence during a Twitch stream. He was discussing new, more secure communication methods for Anons, specifically using platforms like OpenSIM and Osgrid.
Virtual worlds, basically,
Uh-huh.
for secure comms.
Pretty much. For those unfamiliar, these are open source platforms for creating and interacting in virtual 3D worlds. Think of it as a more decentralized, user-run version of something like Second Life. For Anonymous, this represented a strategic move towards more secure and, crucially, less traceable meeting spaces. It reflected their constant game of cat and mouse with authorities, and it was in this context that Commander X suddenly recognized them. He said, "Hi, yes, he's here, the Federation is here," and then with even more emphasis, the Federation are also friends of Anonymous.
Wow, that's a huge shout out from someone like Commander X.
Massive. Dexter describes this as a seemingly overnight endorsement. It led to a surge of followers for his group's account. And this raises a really important question, doesn't it? What does this tell us about the inherent human need for validation and how informal hierarchies can just spontaneously emerge and hold sway, even in a movement that prides itself on being decentralized?
Yeah, it suggests that maybe true decentralization in practice
Yeah,
is always kind of at odds with our human psychology. We often seek recognition
right.
or look for informal leaders to guide the impact.
Exactly, it's a tension. And subsequently, during the George Floyd protests just weeks later, their profile was elevated even further. Dexter's group briefly returned, but not primarily as hackers this time. They were there in a humanitarian capacity, helping protesters on the ground with first aid and widely sharing footage on Twitter under the hashtag HROP,
Hashtag hetero.
stood for Humanitarian Response Operations. It was a visible, impactful effort that showcased a different, more altruistic side of their commitment.
That's a powerful pivot, moving from digital activism to direct humanitarian aid on the ground. And it's during this intensely public time, amidst the George Floyd protests and this heightened visibility for Anonymous, that Dexter had another revealing conversation. Commander X, the very person who had given his group that crucial endorsement, confided in him on Osgrid. He observed a significant shift happening within the movement. He said, and this is a quote, "It's surprising what Anonymous is now, like there's a shift." Quote, "Not many of the new Anons listen to the wisdom I and others try to preach out there. Surprisingly, my support now comes from places where I never expected."
Wow,
Yeah.
yeah. That wasn't just a casual comment. That was a veteran of the movement articulating a growing disconnect, a feeling that the newer generation wasn't adhering to the original tenets or showing the same respect for the wisdom accumulated by their predecessors.
Exactly. The phrase, "my support now comes from places where I never expected," is particularly telling, isn't it? It implies a fracturing, a divergence, not just in methods, but maybe even in fundamental goals and ideologies. Commander X, someone deeply steeped in the movement's history, was seeing its foundational system protocols being interpreted and executed in ways he didn't recognize, and crucially, in ways that felt less aligned with the collective wisdom he and others tried to impart.
It sounds like a poignant observation of what happens when a movement's identity gets diluted through broad, maybe unfiltered participation. Precisely. And Dexter reflects on this moment, admitting that had he understood the weight of those words, then he probably would rethought things. This foreshadowing is critical because it speaks directly to the inherent challenges of maintaining a cohesive identity and purpose in a movement that is, by its very definition, leaderless and open to individual interpretation. Without a central authority to guide or enforce principles, the collective is susceptible to the whims, the evolving priorities, and crucially, the human bugs of its individual members, making it incredibly difficult to sustain a unified front over time.
A moment of quiet alarm that he, in hindsight, wishes he'd processed more deeply. And this shift wasn't just a theoretical concept for Dexter. He started seeing these flags, as he called them, up close, manifesting in real-world disappointment. About a month after that conversation with Commander X, he was invited to join GHC-Sec, a hacking crew operating under the anonymous banner. But here's the crucial detail. He joined in a non-hacking capacity. He was actively distancing myself from my past more after hacker retirement, trying to step back from direct hacktivism while still wanting to be involved in the broader cause.
Okay, so trying to contribute differently?
Exactly. And the first flag that truly bothered him, the first major crack he observed, was the case of Vanessa Gillen, the soldier missing from Fort Hood. He was profoundly moved by the details of her disappearance, the perceived inaction and, frankly, stonewalling by the Army, and the alarming history of suicides and sexual assault at Fort Hood, especially concerning the treatment of minorities in the military. For him, this wasn't a case for abstract hacktivism. It was a clear, urgent call for activism that demanded immediate, tangible action, a deeply human cause, personally resonating with his principles, and he felt a strong conviction that Anonymous should act decisively.
This moment where a deeply felt personal conviction failed to ignite collective action. This is our first clear bug in the system's wetware, as you put it earlier. Dexer's SEC members within GHC SEC were initially 100% with me, agreeing to use every other avenue to create a buzz that lead in protests. So you see internal group cohesion there, a shared sense of urgency within his immediate circle.
Right. His core team was on board.
Yeah. Dexter poured himself into the effort, primarily reaching out to various Latino community groups, believing that a coordinated public-facing campaign could draw the necessary attention. However, despite his considerable efforts, the external interest from the wider anonymous collective beyond his immediate group was profoundly lacking. As he put it, nobody else outside of that really was interested in it. Dexter's disappointment was palpable, even if he initially rationalized it by thinking, oh, other Anons are just busy.
Yeah, you try to make excuses for it at first.
Exactly. But this moment illustrates a broader and critical challenge in decentralized movements. A deeply held personal passion, no matter how outrageous or compelling, doesn't always translate into collective action across the wider, diffuse network. It exposes the inherent difficulty in coordinating sustained effort without a central authority, or a shared set of immediate priorities, or even just a common framework for deciding which causes warrant significant collective energy. And for someone like you, who often pushes forward when something needs doing, regardless of external validation, well, this widespread apathy must stand in stark contrast to that instinct.
Absolutely. It's a very different mindset. My inclination has always been that if something needs doing, you find a way to make it happen,
Right.
without a large collective behind you. But for Dexter, this lack of widespread engagement on a cause he felt so strongly about was just the beginning of his disillusionment. The second flag he noticed, what he termed a dynamic shift, was even more jarring. This involved a new generation discovering Anonymous through platforms like TikTok. He admits this new ways initially invigorated everyone, to some extent, bringing fresh energy. However, it also brought what he described as a little cringe, a sense of discomfort and embarrassment.
Cringe? How so?
Well, he recounted specific examples, videos depicting Guy Fawkes masks, the very symbol of Anonymous, being used in tease dances or outright sexualizing Anons to hell. It's a truly jarring image, right? Taking a symbol steeped in defiance, resistance, and a serious commitment to exposing injustice and transforming it into something superficial, performative, and entirely disconnected from its original purpose. This dilution was a significant alarm bell for him.
Yeah, that definitely raises an important question about the impact of viral popularity and the inevitable human bugs that come with it on a movement's core ideology. Dexter observed a new wave of users coming in, having virtually no idea what amans were fully about. This influx of individuals, often drawn by the superficial or trendy aspects of the movement's image rather than its foundational principles, led to a significant dilution of its original purpose. The consequence, as he detailed with pretty blunt honesty, was a rise in infighting for absolutely petty shit.
Petty shit like what?
He specifically mentioned what he called power leveling, essentially, trying to gain status or appear more important than others, and what he crudely but vividly termed ego fagging,
Okay.
which meant blatant self-promotion, grandstanding, competing for attention, just ego-driven behavior. These internal squabbles driven by ego rather than genuine cause were becoming rampant. And crucially, he emphasized that this wasn't merely a new-gen issue, it was happening all across the board, which didn't sit well with them at all.
So the rot was setting in everywhere, not just with the newcomers.
Pretty much. It's a classic example of how mass popularization, while broadening reach, can simultaneously fragment and dilute a movement's core identity. It creates internal conflict rather than reinforcing unity. The focus turns inward on personal ego and trivial squabbles rather than outward on the stated cause. Yet despite this growing disillusionment, Dexer persevered. He still deeply believed in the underlying ideology and perhaps even more powerfully in the unity that I never really felt in life. Family, if that makes sense. This speaks to the profound emotional pull of belonging, doesn't it? A fundamental human need that kept him tethered, even as the reality of the collective was starting to crumble around him.
That desire for belonging, for a sense of family and unity, it's such a powerful, almost primal motivator. But even that, as you said, has its limits. For Dexer, that limit was reached with what he describes as the final straw, a case that directly impacted someone he cared about deeply. This wasn't some abstract injustice happening far away. It was a full-blown malicious campaign involving the harassment of their family, including their children.
Oh, wow. That's incredibly serious.
Incredibly. And this, for him, unequivocally, fit the bill to fight back. It was personal, urgent, and he felt it was a clear demonstration of why Anonymous at its core was supposed to exist, to protect the vulnerable, to fight against those who wield power maliciously. He re-engaged, even if only in a half capacity, and his immediate sect members were fully supportive. They agreed to an around-the-clock operation, understanding it would require multiple people, shifts, and unity to execute effectively. They even went so far as to prepare a video detailing the campaign, ready to launch a comprehensive, complex counteroffensive. Everything was in place, the plan was solid, the conviction was absolute.
And then, what's truly harrowing here is the swift, brutal shattering of that illusion of support that had been so carefully built. Despite the meticulous planning, the deeply personal connection to the cause, and the explicit agreement for collective action from his immediate group, when it came time to actually execute, there was just deafening silence. No answer. Even worse, one or two even said it wasn't an opus worth doing.
Are you serious? Not worth doing, after agreeing.
That's what he reported. This wasn't just a lack of enthusiasm, it was an outright rejection of a cause that, by all accounts, perfectly aligned with Anonymous's stated ideals. This failure of collective action, this sudden desertion, left Dexer livid in every sense of the word. His anger wasn't just frustration, it was a profound sense of betrayal. The illusion of thinking I had support within the movement, this sense of family he had cherished, was just gone with it. This marks the moment of complete, crushing alienation for him. He was forced to confront a pivotal existential question that cut right to the core of his identity within Anonymous. What the fuck was I fighting for when no one is down to do shit when it's called for?
Yeah. That's a devastating question to have to ask yourself.
It really is. This isn't just a question of disappointment, it's the internal collapse of purpose. It highlights the critical point where an individual's deep-seated principles can no longer align with a collective that, in its moment of truth, fails to act on its stated mission.
And when that illusion shattered, when that pivotal question went unanswered by action, Dexer was done. He declared he would undertake the work on my own, showing his unwavering personal commitment despite the collective's failure. His immediate sect members, and even the founder of GHCSec, were reportedly furious, not at Dexer, but because they no longer recognized what they were seeing from the community at large.
So they saw the same breakdown he did.
Exactly. They collectively realized that it wasn't about fully the cause anymore, due to the overwhelming petty infighting and all the other issues they had been witnessing. It was a systemic breakdown, wasn't it? Where the human bugs of ego and internal squabbling had completely overwhelmed the system protocol. This led to a very clear and collective decision one November night. GHCSec would step away from Anonymous entirely. They decided to instead work with the local league's team, a platform focused on exposing local corruption and injustice, which allowed them to continue their work with integrity. The founder even made a public statement, tweeting something like, "I'm going to pull out of the anonymous collective altogether with the rest of #DSEC, and we're going to work as support and investigators for the website localleaks.org." It wasn't just Dexer leaving. It was his entire loyal group, a cohesive and committed unit, severing ties, making a powerful statement about the state of Anonymous at that time.
Yeah, that collective withdrawal of an entire group, one that was once deeply embedded and committed, it really signifies a profound systemic failure within the broader collective. It underscores a critical point about the longevity and the sustainability of decentralized movements. It wasn't merely a personal disagreement for Dexer. It was a realization by his entire team that the internal bugs, the infighting, the rampant ego, the lack of genuine commitment to the stated causes had rendered the system ineffective for them. Their pivot to localleaks.org wasn't an abandonment of their principles, not at all. It was a strategic search for a new, more functional platform where their collective skills and dedication could still be applied meaningfully without the constant internal friction. It powerfully illustrates that for a decentralized movement to retain its members and its impact, it has to consistently deliver on the promise of collective action and shared purpose. Something Anonymous, in this particular iteration, had demonstrably failed to do for GHDSEC. This moment is a testament to the fact that even the most dedicated individuals and groups have their limits when the collective infrastructure, or in this case, the collective wetware, becomes too corrupted by its own internal issues.
That's a powerful point about knowing when to pivot and find new avenues for impact rather than just banging your head against a wall. After stepping down, Dexer describes focusing on other projects, channeling his intense anger and disillusionment as fuel for new endeavors. It's fascinating how he repurposed that powerful emotion into something productive, right? Rather than letting it just consume him. He also began encountering other former Anons, like someone he refers to as DR, who had apparently been with the collective since its early phases. DR echoed Dexer's sentiments, describing Anonymous as going to shit when it went all moral fagging.
Moral fagging, huh? Interesting term.
Yeah, his words. While crude, it seems to reflect a frustration felt by some veterans that the movement had become overly focused on maybe performative morality, or had become too rigid and dogmatic in its application of ethics rather than focusing on pragmatic action. It suggests a shared frustration among some veterans about the movement's evolution, where perhaps the why became obscured by the how or even by internal policing.
That makes sense. A sort of ideological rigidity creeping in.
Possibly. Yet despite this shared disappointment, Dexer also maintained contact with some active Anons who respected his decision to step back. This even led to an appearance on the Anonymous Bites Back podcast. It seems like he was still trying to navigate this complex space, maybe even considering going back to the mask for a while, feeling that pull of purpose and belonging again.
And what's truly fascinating here is how close Dexer apparently came to returning, and what ultimately solidified his decision to stay away. The very idea of going back to the mask shows the enduring, almost magnetic pull of that sense of purpose and collective identity, doesn't it? Even after such profound disillusionment. However, his brief re-engagement, even with a podcast focused on active Anons, quickly exposed the same underlying human bugs. He encountered creative differences and a big infight among the podcast members themselves.
Seriously, history repeating itself right there.
Pretty much. This wasn't just external conflict, it was internal strife, repeating past patterns of the very issues. The ego, the infighting, the petty squabbles that had driven him away from Anonymous in the first place. It was a stark, almost immediate reminder that these bugs weren't isolated to one corner of the movement, but seemed endemic to the system itself when human elements were involved. The final nail in the coffin was when, as he put it, drama hit my doorstep again over some petty shit. This wasn't a philosophical choice to stay away. It was a deeply personal boundary being repeatedly crossed, disrupting his peace and his new path.
Enough was enough, basically.
Exactly. His subsequent act of symbolically changing his handle, his digital identity, from his anonymous alias to simply Dexer, and carving out his own independent path. That's a powerful statement. It represents not just leaving a collective, but forging a new self, asserting an identity and purpose that was no longer reliant on the mask, but on his own uncompromised principles. He wasn't just stepping away, he was stepping into a new, self-defined future.
So, what does this all mean for Dexer now? Looking back at such an intense and, well, formative period of his life, he acknowledges that some individuals within the movement still do truly good work, which shows a nuanced perspective, right? He's not entirely dismissive of Anonymous's potential or ongoing impact. His role now seems to be offering advice and insights to Anons who seek him out, sharing his rich and hard-won experience with those still navigating that complex world. But for himself, he's absolutely clear. I wouldn't return to being an active Anon, he says. At this stage, to go back to taking on the mantle actively, it's equal to nostalgia of what could have been. It's a powerful statement, isn't it? Recognizing that the past is indeed the past, and that true, impactful engagement means being present, evolving, and not chasing a ghost of what once was. He understands that his time in that specific capacity is past, but the lessons remain.
Yeah, and this brings us to the profound meaning of atonement in Dexter's journey, which is far more than just regret or saying sorry. He views his time as an active anonymous member as having passed, but the experience, despite its disappointments and the disillusionment, provided him with the foundation I needed to become for which I can hold myself accountable. This isn't a narrative of failure, it's one of immense growth and self-discovery. He frames his stepping down not as abandoning a cause, but as giving back, in my own way, to a movement that did what it's supposed to do. It took ordinary people and made them to be those with purpose.
That's a truly profound reinterpretation, turning a negative into a foundational positive.
Yeah. Absolutely. He concludes with a powerful analogy someone once shared with him, which became like a cornerstone of his understanding. Anonymous is like a system protocol, with the wetware element being people. But like any system, it will always have bugs. Learn from it and carry it. That just means the idea did its job. This perspective allows him to find a deep peace with his past. He understands that the human bugs, the ego, the internal conflicts, the varying levels of commitment are inherent to any collective system involving people. His atonement, then, isn't about seeking forgiveness for past actions, but about finding peace with his past experiences, accepting the imperfections of the collective system, and ultimately forging a new path where his personal principles align perfectly with his capacity for genuine impact. Unburdened by the very bugs that once drove him away, he carried the lessons but shed the mask.
Wow, what an incredible journey and what a profound reinterpretation of his role and experience. Dexter's story is a truly powerful testament to the internal conflicts that inevitably arise when deeply held personal convictions clash with the often messy, unpredictable realities of a large, decentralized movement. His decisions to step away, driven by profound disappointment over unmet expectations of collective action and the pervasive, petty infighting, really highlight the inherent limits that people, even those deeply committed, sometimes encounter within such fluid structures. It's a compelling contrast to what some of us, perhaps myself included, might initially envision this relentless, almost boundless willingness to push through those very limits, to risk everything in the pursuit of understanding or enacting a perceived good, regardless of whether the collective follows.
It's a different kind of strength, perhaps, knowing when to change course.
Yeah. But his story, as you both so clearly articulated, isn't one of judgment, nor is it a wholesale critique of the core ideals of Anonymous. Instead, it's an experience, a raw, unflinching look at how the powerful ideals of unity and purpose can draw individuals in, ignite their passion, and shape their identity. But how the very human bugs, things like ego, internal conflict, shifting priorities, and widely varying levels of commitment can ultimately redefine a person's role within that system. What we take away from this isn't to judge Dexter's choices, but to truly understand the complex tapestry of his experience, to learn from the very real, personal, and systemic elements that led him to step aside, even from causes he deeply believed in. It's a crucial reminder, I think, that the line between principle and personal capacity is often blurred, and each person must, in the end, find their own atonement, their own peace with their chosen path, whether that's within a collective or independently defined.
Well said.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Dexter's world and the intricate dynamics of Anonymous. As you reflect on his journey, I want to leave you with this thought. In what ways do you navigate the bugs in the system protocols of your own communities, your workplaces, or your chosen movements? And how do you find your own purpose or atonement within them, recognizing that ever-present human element? Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and keep those midnight lights burning. Good night.